with nothing but a Bible and a bicycle.
Shalom, shalom, my family, friends, and fellow believers. Well, it looks like our good Lord has once again exposed a mocker and denier of the Bible for the long-tongued liar that they truly are. Of course, I'm talking about that whole Billy Carson, Wes Huff debate debacle. If you haven't heard about that one, well, I urge you to check out that link down below and get all caught up on that. But I'm here to announce that it's finally happened, folks. The whole Wes Huff appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast has finally dropped. And boy, was it a doozy. To begin with, they did start off mentioning the whole Billy Carson thing.
The debate
Yeah.
that you had with Billy Carson. It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
When you get caught with your pants down, you're supposed to say, I got caught with my pants down.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's the only, especially if you're public, it's very clear that you're incorrect.
Well, the irony of this situation is if he just kind of left it, it probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to the splash
No.
that it's made.
You're not doing people a service, especially people like myself that aren't educated in this. Like we turn to others who claim to have a vast knowledge of this to help me out. Tell me what's
Yeah.
going on. When I sit down and talk to you, tell me what's going on. And if you don't really know, you're fucking over a lot of people, unfortunately,
Yeah.
for yourself. People have such a deep search for meaning and truth that if you are confident, and which is what a con man is, confidence man. If you are really good at expressing yourself and really you show confidence in your convictions, you can persuade a lot of people.
Yeah. Confidence is not competency.
Yes.
And unfortunately, those
Right.
things get confused a lot.
Well, it covers up for competency sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In religion and politics and
Yeah.
all sorts of things, right?
And everything. He was a nice guy.
He's
I really enjoyed talking to him. I really do. I think his videos are fun. But I also think truth is important.
I had no problem with him as an individual.
He just needs to course correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, course correct and recognize what you know and what you don't know. And that
After they get that out of the way, starts focusing more on the Bible, Christianity in particular, the existence of God, the divinity of Yeshua.
If I'm wrong about the Bible, those people who push back on me, right? Those skeptics of various worldviews, if the things they were saying about the Bible were true, then it did actually legitimately undermine what I believed. And so I needed to take that seriously. I had an obligation to actually investigate those things as far as I could.
And eventually they even delve into some of the more linguistic and cultural aspects of the ancient Hebrew writings that most of us know as the scriptures.
That's why the book of Isaiah, what you were telling me, is so fascinating. That 1,000 years later,
Yeah.
you have the exact translation of this. Something in a time where there's no printed press and something that had been passed on for so long as an oral tradition is exact word for word written.
pretty wild.
You find in a cave in Qumran.
Yeah.
And then the same thing you get in the English translation of the Bible today. That's nuts.
And I gotta give it to Joe. He comes out with both barrels blazing with the questions, both about the faith and the Bible itself. But I admire his sincerity. He doesn't come across as bantering or sarcastic as we've seen so much from Joe in the past when it comes to the subject. And I don't know if that's due to some of the more recent guests he's had on or his interactions with Billy Carson and that whole debacle, or what led up to this, but this interaction with him and Wes, I think Joe truly, genuinely respects Wes, not only as a biblical authority, but also just as a guy. They seem to get along quite well. And Joe actually comes across as hungry for the answers to these questions he's posing, as if he's genuinely seeking the truth.
So as a Christian, what do you think about all this stuff? What do you think about ancient hominids, Australopithecus, Neanderthals? What was God up to with all this?
I don't think the Bible is trying to explain how people came into existence in the same way that maybe we want it to. And a lot of people read the origin stories in Genesis as a scientific textbook. And I think ultimately that misses the point.
And you can tell that he's anxious to listen and receive what Wes has to offer.
however many billions of years ago, there was nothing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there was something. And Terence McKenna had a great line that said that science requires one miracle. The Big Bang.
Totally.
It requires a miracle.
Well, I always say that when people ask me about, the miracles in the Bible.
Yeah.
And I say, well, if the first miracle happened, if everything, nothing became everything,
Right.
then, Jesus turning water into wine.
That's an easy one.
Well, yeah.
That's a party trick.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is nothing compared to the birth of the universe, but we're convinced at the creation of the universe, and we're very skeptical at other miracles. It's very odd.
I think there's an inconsistency there. And you do see when the Big Bang is first hypothesized that there are individuals who are uncomfortable with that sounding like in the beginning. Because before that, the idea was that the universe was eternal.
Yeah.
And if you propose a point in time where everything starts to exist, well, and you see some of these people are pushing back on it. They say things like, well, that sounds too religious. That sounds like a beginning point in time.
Right.
And at that point, if there's a Big Bang, you have to figure out, okay, well, what's the Big Banger?
Right.
And I mean, that's ultimately it's a metaphysical religious question. How did that thing get kicked off?
That's too much. I don't want to. I can kind of wrap my head around 14 billion years. I can't wrap my head around eternity.
Now, granted, Joe's still struggling with that all too familiar hurdle that a lot of us go through when we start wrestling with God. And that is the hurdle of admitting that there's just some things that we're just never going to have the answers to with our limited human understanding. Just submit to the authority and the enigmatic nature of God.
Whatever love is, whatever good is, it's a very real thing, and it seems to not exist, certainly not in the volume in other animals that exists in us. There's obviously nurturing in other animals. They nurture their loved ones, but their perception of life and death and all of it is very different than ours. So it leads me to why? Why is our version of life so much more rich and complicated than any other being that exists? And why do we have this insatiable desire to learn and know more?
There's something going on.
There's something going on with all of us.
Yeah.
We kind of know it and we don't know it, but it's just, you can't measure it and you can't put it on a scale. And so people don't like that.
Yeah.
They don't like that. It makes them feel dumb to believe in that. It makes them feel dumb to even speculate.
It's one I struggled with, and some days, to be honest, as a human being, I still struggle intellectually. But folks, that's where it comes down to faith, and to not believing in God, but getting to know the living God.
The weird thing about people is that our brain is clearly set up differently than every other creature that exists. And if evolution is the only thing that created us, it's just evolution. How the fuck did we get so far ahead of everybody else? Something that's smaller than the head of a pin that becomes the entire universe that we say is pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And just to say that just happened, and you don't really, I know you don't want to say you don't know, but you really don't know. There's no way you can know. It's not really possible to know. There's no working theory where you can convince me that the whole universe gets compressed into something smaller than the head of a pin and then instantaneously becomes everything that you see. But at the end of the day, you have one miracle. You have the Big Bang. All of science agrees this happened. That is so much crazier than anything that any religion is proposing, that it's so interesting to me that we say we have echoes of the Big Bang. There's radio echoes. Yeah, but also, if a miracle did take place, let's assume that there is actually a higher power that occasionally interacts with human beings. And if a miracle did take place and you were there, you don't have a camera, you don't have a cell phone, you don't have a pen, you can't write things down, maybe you can't even read. And you have this thing that happens to you, and this thing changes the course of human history. This thing changes the direction, the ideology that these people subscribe to, and the moral and ethical structure that they live their life by. It changes untold billions of human beings from that point on.
Yeah.
Pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
That in itself, even if this is just a revelation without a divine interaction, that's a fucking miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle that it was created at all. Like the whole idea that Christianity, when you're saying that the book of, was it the book of Isaiah?
Yeah.
That the same book is exactly the same as, like, that's a miracle.
So I'm not going to hold it against Joe for that little hurdle, because I think it's one that most folks that's coming from the secular world and approaching the scriptures and Yeshua and our uncreated creator face. I know I did. But we just have to come to the realization and accept the fact that God is beyond our human comprehension. But the conception of God is undeniable, unless one purposely chooses not to acknowledge the overwhelming evidence. But I think Joe brings up a very interesting point where he brings up miracles. I mean, we're willing to believe in the Big Bang, something from nothing, which is an absolute miracle, but we still stubbornly struggle against Yeshua Hamashiach.
Where you have this Jewish itinerant guy who's walking around first century Roman-occupied Judea. He's making some pretty audacious claims to be God himself, and then he predicts his own death and resurrection. And then his disciples they think it's over. Like, they're like, he's dead, we're done.
Yeah.
And then they go from 11, scared men, because Judas commits suicide, scared men in an upper room, to completely overhauling the Roman world in only a couple hundred years, because of this claim that they say they saw Jesus resurrected. Like, there's something different that goes on there, that they're like, this is a miracle, right?
It's very difficult for anybody who thinks of themselves as an intelligent person who's secular to even entertain the possibility that someone died and come back to life.
And I get that. But we've already talked about the fact that we don't think that the only thing that exists is matter and motion. We as in you and I, right? Like, we believe that there's something else going on in this world that's a little bit crazy.
There's something else.
And that to, I think, exclude that, I think excludes something that you're kind of putting blinders on for.
In the end, Wes gently and efficiently exposed and dismantled some of those blinders that Joe's been wearing, gently removing the scales from his eyes.
And so Christians were this very oddball group.
Kind of crazy that it wound up taking over the area.
Well, that's part of, I think, the argument of, well, how do you explain that? How do you explain it going from 11 scared disciples in an upper room to being willing to go out and die for the proclamation that you believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and you saw him and you touched him and you ate with him, and he wasn't a ghost. You actually ate fish with the resurrected Jesus.
And as I said earlier, I think Joe is sincerely seeking truth. And again, no matter the circumstance, anyone that sets out to sincerely seek the truth will discover that it inevitably leads to Yeshua.
So it does work. Right? Like, if you do live like a Christian and you do follow the principles of Christ, you will have a richer, more love-filled life. So it is true, right? But you have to submit to this concept that this guy was the child of God who came down to earth, let himself be crucified, came back from the dead, explained a bunch of stuff for people, and then said, all right, see you when I come back.
And you don't know how you can wrap your head around that.
Right. That's the ultimate test of faith.
And as Joe said, the good thing that came out of all this is always the Lord's will, and that mockers and deceivers, such as Billy Carson, will eventually be drawn out of the darkness and exposed to the light, the light.
I'm sad that it went down the way it went down with you and Billy, but the good thing out of it is that a lot of people became aware of your work.
But then Wes drops the bomb on Joe. The "what do you think of Jesus" bomb.
In all of this, what do you think of Jesus? Like, in terms of your own, like, journeying and trying to find answers to ultimate questions. What do you think of the historical person of Jesus?
Well, it certainly seems like there's a lot of people that believe that there was this very exceptional human being that existed. So the question is, what does that mean? Does it mean he was the Son of God? Does it mean he was just some completely unique human being that had this vision of humanity and this way of educating people and spreading this ideology that would ultimately change the way human beings interact with each other forever. So what is he the Son of God? Well, are we all? That's another question, right? Do we all have that inside of us? Do we all have that ability to change everything around us inside of us? Do we all have that unique connection to the divine? And is he a representation of the best version of that? Or was he an actual person that was the Son of God? And is it important?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what does it mean? It's just the fact that it's a question to ponder is a miracle in itself.
Now, I'm not going to speculate, overanalyze, or interpret Joe's answers. If you want to see that, I highly encourage you to go check out the Joe Rogan podcast featuring Wes Huff. Links will be down below. Overall, it was an awesome podcast. I highly recommend it. Whether you're a regular visitor of Joe Rogan's or not, Wes himself is a fountain of information and inspiration when it comes to biblical studies. Thank you for being here. I know your time is valuable, and I surely do appreciate you spending a little bit here. Hope to see you here next time. And until next time, remember, Yeshua, Jesus loves you. So do I. Now get off of here. Go ride your bike. Check out that Joe Rogan podcast. And read your Bible.